Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Start Small, Think Big podcast. My name is Brad Grew, founder and CEO of Digital Meld.
I'm Grew, CTO of Digital Meld.
And I'm Carrie Hundley, Chief Growth Officer at Digital Meld.
And today we're diving into a topic that's kind of transforming every industry, and that's automation. But automation is not just about efficiency; it's also about being the backbone of data quality and the future of effective AI implementation. Automation's been around for decades, right? The Industrial Revolution was all about automation. But automation, when it comes to a business perspective, is basically a business process problem. And so we're going to talk about all the things we can do from an automation perspective to help you get your data where it needs to be for AI, and then also just to help you increase your productivity and focus on the things that really matter. We're going to give some real life business examples from various industries to kind of get the wheels turning in your head to maybe think about how automation can work within your business. And we usually start off the show with a couple minutes just diving into the latest news and trends. Obviously, things are changing very, very rapidly and very, very quickly in the AI and automation and technology space. Carrie, you want to start us off?
Yeah, this is an exciting time to be talking about automation. Obviously, it's important and exciting to us internally every day because that's what we're naturally discussing. But automation is definitely having a moment in the general public, if you will. I was reading a Technavio report, and they're saying that robotic process automation's market is jumping by over $40 million in the next few years, which is 42% growth. That's completely insane. Quick sidebar for those of us who are not necessarily familiar with robotic process automation or wondering what that actual definition is. It's like a digital worker bee. So software that takes repetitive rules-based tasks that you hate. So rules meaning once you do this step, then this next step has to be done before the subsequent step after that. That's what rules-based means. But think data entry or invoice processing, and it handles them not only quickly, but flawlessly. So it's a bit of a bot to mimic what you're doing. Click here, copy there, save it in this folder, but at turbo speed and in a repetitive manner that's accurate and consistent. So if you're able to free up time, reduce errors, and churn out, most importantly, clean data that AI can actually use, that's always a win. That's pretty slick. So,
now, you said 40 million. Do you mean 40 billion?
I did mean 40 billion. I think that my brain still hasn't even accepted the figure. To be completely honest with you, it's so huge. Yes, 40 billion.
Yeah, I just want to make that clear that it's exponential growth is coming from that perspective, and we see it now with the automated, warehouses from like Amazon. I saw an automated waiter in the past week at a restaurant here locally in Houston. That was it's just weird to see out in the world that like you're finally arriving to the Jetsons. Basically, is what it's coming to.
Yeah, I mean, on that, I went to a conference this week. It was AI and oil and gas in Houston, and one of the things that I thought was interesting was the robotics use. Robotics and really drones. There's a lot of automated drones now that are taking off and landing, and even some, honestly, they look like mini airplanes. It's kind of cool. And they're doing 40-mile treks to get imaging data and all kinds of stuff. And it's all automated. You can also do it, fully remote as well. So I think the future of vision AI, the future of drone technology specifically is pretty sweet. I saw a lot of great use cases there. So some of the stuff, it was a pretty busy week on the news sector, but one of the things I thought was interesting was the Firebase release from Google. Did you get a chance to look at that, Brad? I've messed with it a little bit and have kind of caught up on some articles more recently in the past 2 days since I was at that conference. But streamlining application building, and all that good stuff, like it looks like a pretty slick tool from what I've seen.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, Google had their big Google Cloud Platform conference and announcements this week as well. They announced a lot of things. Gemini 2.5 basically is being embedded, much like Copilot from Microsoft is embedded to every one of their products. They're doing that with Gemini 2.5 now. So across their entire web stack and services stack, Google's kind of embedding that in. But one of the things they did announce was Firebase Studio. And for what people don't know, Firebase was basically like their database platform for like mobile apps that was in the cloud. Very easy to use, has authentication built in. But they've also come out with Firebase Studio now, which is a full web and mobile app development platform built on top of Gemini 2.5, utilizing Firebase. So think Cursor and Windsurf and GitHub Copilot and all these other tools that in Claude 3.7 that you can utilize to build full stack apps. I played around with it for about 2 hours last night, building a couple of really cool proof of concepts. It's actually really, really slick. And right now it's free. It looks like to be free. I think they limit you on some of the things you can do. It's still very limited, but it's just showing that, again, everybody's going to need to know a little bit about coding in the future. I listened to an interview with the CEO of GitHub this past week on a YouTube video, and he's basically, we should be teaching coding like we teach reading, writing, and arithmetic in school, because as kids grow up, they're going to need to know at least the basics of object-oriented programming. But the beauty is you don't need to be an expert coder to get like a working proof of concept. And we've talked about that many times. The goal is to get a proof of concept or an MVP in front of people, get user buy-in, get that product market fit, and then bring in a team of experts to help build and scale that to what it needs to be. But the more tools that come along like that are the better, in my opinion. We're big fans of like no-code, low-code solutions. So like Flutterflow is another one. There's Lovable, which is one that's kind of like snuck up in recent weeks. But now if Google's joining that fray, the funny thing is Google is using their code editor inside of this platform is Microsoft's Visual Studio Code, much like Windsurf, much like Cursor. So it's just funny that you have all these companies like trying to build the best tool sets, and they're using each other's models. I think you can use GitHub Copilot as an example. You can use Gemini as one of the models. It's just really cool to see all these new things coming to help you get those ideas. It's an idea. The people with the best ideas and the best execution are going to be, really rising to the top.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, you don't need to be technical to use Firebase. It's like an LLM. You ask it in plain English, like, "Hey, I want to build this app that." One of the examples that pops up is generates poems from photos, and so you don't have to be technical. You can use plain English to describe what you want, to mess around with it. So if you like to tinker with things, I'd definitely check that out because it is free right now.
And the thing I like about it is it has some pre-built in web stacks that it likes to use. Most of it's JavaScript based, but you have the option to say, hey, use Python, use JavaScript, use these other sorts of things. You can do those in the other ones as well, but it kind of gives you more of a roadmap for the people that know even less. And you can have that conversation like, hey, I'm trying to build this. What web stack would you recommend? And then you can say, hey, why would you recommend that web stack? And you have that conversation back and forth. And you have it build, you describe like, hey, I want a one-page web app that'll do this and have the, this outcome once a user inputs data and hit submit. And then once it creates that for you, you can have a contextual conversation back and forth to change whether you like something or don't like something or add something. It's really just a conversational way of building an app. It's so cool. Again, they're not the only ones that have built that tool, but the fact that they've built it on top of Firebase, which is the database storage that most mobile apps probably use, is basically Firebase because they were the first in the forefront. There's other options too, like we're big fans of Supabase and PostgreSQL. Supabase is basically a PostgreSQL plus Firebase, so it has that authentication layer built in, that row-level security that makes it really, really easy. And it has a GUI for the folks that aren't database admins. There's a lot of really, 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 really great things from that perspective.
Quick call to action for the audience. If you're using any of these tools, you've built some cool stuff, you have some big aha moments, that can be related to the news segment as well, really anything that we talk about. So feel free to drop us a line if you've had a win or you have a question. We try to make this as tangible and digestible as possible, but I'm sure there's always a way that we could double click. So feel free to shoot those our way.
Yeah, and a couple other things we could talk about from the news perspective. John Carmack, for those that don't know, John Carmack of id Software fame. So they built Wolfenstein and Quake, probably one of the most brilliant computer programming minds we've ever seen. And he just knows it down to the kernel level. Just a brilliant guy. He worked at Meta on the VR stuff for several years once he exited from id Software. So Microsoft released an AI-generated replica of Quake 2. So Quake 2 is a video game that was very popular right when I graduated high school. Me and my friends, got our first 3D graphics cards to play that game. And I remember, you had to use 2 CDs to install it, and it just took forever, and then you were up and running. Now you can play that game in a browser. You've been able to do that for many years. But now it's all AI-generated on the fly. And so it's building this world as you're actually running through this world. And there was a conversation on Twitter, also known as X, but I always call it Twitter, where John Carmack kind of responded to it, maybe because some people were raising alarms. It's like, this is a nightmare for creative artists. And, video games are very much a creative art. And he just responded and said, I'll leave a link for his full response in the show notes, but just know that he's saying that, hey, this is just the new iteration in the toolbox. It's going to free people up. Like, while he still loves being in the kernel and doing all these things at the lowest level you can get, the foundational level for programming, this is just going to let more ideas and better things get out there. So if one of the most brilliant programming minds in the world isn't scared of this AI programming tools, you probably shouldn't be either. Again, I think we're all limited on time, right? And so whatever we can do to free up our time is our finite resource. It was just really refreshing to see literally one of the most brilliant computer programmers that's ever lived be like, no, this isn't a big deal. Like, I champion this because it gives more people the ability to build these amazing worlds and these amazing things and these amazing experiences. It's a very nice response. I highly recommend reading it if you're interested in that, in the show notes.
Real quick before we switch gears on that, the reality is these tools, they're not going away. If some company shutters their doors, another one's just going to get spun back up. And so I think that's just kind of the mentality you have to have, because it doesn't matter, what you actually feel about it. People are still going to be developing these things. So just try to glass half full perspective if you can, which I have a very hard time doing myself. You can ask Brad and Carrie.
Yeah. And I will say that I've always thought myself to be an idea man myself. I have OneNotes 15 years old, 12 years old, where I've documented, like, I would love to build this video game one day, just like the perfect video game for my brain. And it's cool to, like, now knowing that programmers who come up in their early 20s who can have these great ideas will now have the ability, like I didn't, to see that come to fruition with either themselves or a small team, at least getting out in front of people and build some cool things. I have pages and pages and pages of notes of just like ideas I wish I would have had time and or knowledge to build. And now knowing that other people are going to be able to do that, just imagine the amazing things. Sure, a lot of them are going to be terrible, but it only takes a few really good standouts, like the next Minecraft, right? That like literally takes the world by storm. That was a one-man show. Just imagine how fast the iteration of Minecraft would have happened over that first 2 or 3 years as it was going to alpha and beta stages if Notch would have had the tools to build this even faster. Don't be afraid, I think, is the biggest thing. And it was good to see. With that said, I think we'll cover one more news story that I think is really important. And I'm going to leave this one up to Carrie regarding some big news with Microsoft and their data centers.
Yeah, so this is interesting. The figure I shared in the first news bit, which is 40 billion, which is enormous, right? Microsoft is making waves, pouring $80 billion into AI data centers this year, which obviously is an incredibly large number. But the word on the street is they are pulling back on some new builds of data centers. So that's probably a little confusing. I think rising energy bills and also an important mentality, I assume, is that part of the backbone of this, which is the concept of let's make what we've got work harder, right? Which is something that we talk about internally all the time. Just that concept, I think, is really useful. And it's interesting that even giants like Microsoft are trying to work smarter, if you will. So everything is about efficiency. It doesn't matter what size organization you are, and automation can step in to do things like tweaking server loads and cutting energy waste. But you got to keep those AI engines purring without needing to build a new building every week. So even the giants like Microsoft are dealing with these issues, right? So if you're running a business, it's like, don't just add more, automate what's already there, and you get clean data from a lean system, which is the win, right? That's AI gold, and I'd say that's business gold as well.
There was the Houston AI event I went to. I think this was like last month at this point, and it was about energy, and that was what they were saying. They had a venture capitalist type person there talking about that, where a lot of people are putting the pause. Some companies are putting the brakes on these huge data center build outs. I think just the market, the economy, the way it is, there's just a lot of unknowns. So I won't be surprised if we see that more. But the reality is, again, we know we're going to need more data centers. It's going to happen eventually. It just, maybe it's not going to be as fast as we anticipated. The big deal where this affects companies like ours is the GPU loads with the public clouds. That's really the frustrating part. It's hard to get those things right now. For most businesses and day-to-day operations, you're not going to see, a huge problem, I don't think.
I think there's a lot of things that came to this, like scaling back. One of this big scale backs was in Ohio, where they had worked with the local government to build infrastructure, and they're still going to build some of that infrastructure like roads and power and utilities because they made that promise as they were granted the ability to build these data centers. They're just backing off of building those data centers. Power, I think, is obviously the biggest hurdle. Robert and I have someone in our family who was actually laid off, who worked in sales for data center build outs, and so like there is a scaling back. I think the economic factors, obviously, with the crazy trade wars and tariffs, and is probably an issue with that. The lack of GPUs and the lack of chipsets, that's going to be an issue too. And the models are just rapidly evolving and becoming more and more refined and more lean. Like, just see what you can do with DeepSeek with something that you can literally buy a $10,000 Mac Studio with 512 gigabytes of RAM, and you can run DeepSeek on that in a black box on your desk. And so you can have the biggest model ever created running on your desktop for $10,000. And that sounds like a lot of money now, but just imagine in 2 to 4 years, that's going to be half that price or a quarter of that price. And they're going to have these models that are even bigger. So just know that they're always going to be rethinking their business model, much like you should be rethinking your business, and you should be rethinking and adjusting on the fly. Again, those long-term plans of planning 5-10 years out, it's great to have those plans and those goals, but like how you're going to get there is going to change every 6 to 12 months because of all these new technology revolutions. And they're just seeing that. Again, I'm not too worried about this because the demand in AI is just going to keep going up. So they're going to need those data centers. But Microsoft, again, is also one of those companies that already has mega data centers all over the world for Azure, right? And for Microsoft 365 and Xbox Live. So they can just utilize those spaces that they already have and that infrastructure that they already have. And the great thing is we had Arnold Castro from Texas A&M on last week. And then you're going to have these, they're building a data center at Texas A&M. So you're going to have these institutions building these their own data centers so they can have their own research compute, which is going to free up some of the compute on the public cloud too. So that's just another thing to keep in mind as well. So as the other colleges and universities are building out their own smaller data centers specific for their use cases, that's going to free up bandwidth on the public clouds. All right. So now that we've covered the news, I think we're ready to dive into the topic of today, and that's all things automation. The goal of automation is to innovate, right, and boost your efficiency and data quality across all of your business. The goal is to just provide approachable examples, just touch base on how we see customers utilizing automation, how we think automation can help folks. We've talked about how starting small, thinking big. So just starting with, the basics of like ifttt.com to automate your own personal inbox. Or I remember when I was traveling for Microsoft, I traveled for Microsoft for almost 5 straight years as a PFE. I couldn't even remember what city I was in most of the time. So I'd be 1 or 2 days here, 1 or 2 days there. I'd be West Coast, East Coast, and then Central Time Zone all in the same week. Basically, I would check in with Foursquare. I don't know if you guys remember that app, but the Foursquare, when you check in someone, like I've landed in Chicago Midway, and then I would dump that to a Google Sheet, and then I would have an IFTTT set. So check that Google Sheet every morning, and then check the weather for wherever that place is, and tell me, do I need a coat or like an umbrella? And so whenever I woke up in the morning, I would have a text message like, hey, dude, check your code umbrella. And it would go against the NOAA.gov service is how I'd get the weather. So just that basic kind of automation that I was able to automate. I don't even need to turn on the news. I would just need to know how I need to dress for that day. Start that menial task. If you have a family, start with a calendar for football and baseball and basketball and soccer and all these other sorts of things.
This one could be personal or work. Everybody hates expenses. There was a company I worked at where to submit expense reports, you had to log into this antiquated portal. It definitely didn't have single sign-on. It had its own authenticator app, all that mess that you have to deal with. And you got to pull your phone out and you got to remember where this app is on your phone. They did allow you to send receipts via email, but it didn't always work very well. The email was the best option, but to get around that, what I did is when I would take pictures of the receipts themselves from my phone, all I had to do was upload them to a OneDrive folder. And then I had an automated flow. And this may sound very confusing and difficult, but it's really not. And if you haven't looked at Power Automate, definitely look at it. That's something we use every day. I use it in my personal life, and I use it definitely in business for a lot of different things. But in this case, it's a flow that basically says, hey, if there's any file added to this folder in your OneDrive, send an email to this email address with that file attached. And then once it was done, it would move it to a process folder so that I could keep those receipts. But it doesn't sound like a lot, but the alternative is me going to the photo, clicking share, hitting the email button, typing in my email address. And it was a very long email address that you had to type. And obviously it would autofill, but still the OneDrive thing I found was just much quicker. So, and then not even just pictures from my phone, you could also take this to your computer. So if you downloaded an invoice on your computer, you just move that invoice file, whether it's a PDF or image file, into that folder, and then it would just, it's going to auto send. So probably saved me 30 seconds for every receipt, but over time, I felt like that was a worthwhile thing to automate. And definitely, I know everybody out there does expenses. So if you haven't looked at doing anything like that, definitely do, because most expense software will let you send an email with that expense receipt or PDF or image or whatever it is. So that's a real easy one that I always tell people.
Yeah, for me, I think my favorite personal use case is updating the variety of calendars that are in my life, whether that be various work and personal. And I'm a new stepmother, so now it's like a whole school calendar and activities and trying to manage. And some calendars I want all the details, some I just want it to show that I'm busy, depending on who else has access to the calendar and what the point is. So you can use a variety of tools, Zapier or if this then that, or there's a whole bunch of different ones, but the ability to not have to input calendar events across multiple calendars all the time, and to be able to kind of set a label or a trigger that says, okay, on this one I want it to be private or color code it this way, all those little things, which I think every person could benefit from that, but some more than others. It was definitely helpful prior to taking this role. I was doing some consulting, and I had a bucket of clients, and all of those different calendars. It was a challenge. Nobody wants to spend 15 hours a week just managing calendars. And then you certainly also don't want to have too much detail in the wrong instances versus not enough in others. So that's really my favorite personal use case.
Those are both great examples and really important for the busy people in life. Like, again, I traveled for 5 years, nearly 100% of the time. Most weeks I would leave Sunday night because I hate flying on Monday mornings, and then I'd fly home Friday night for 50 weeks a year. That was just how it was. I was younger, no wife or kids, and I loved doing it. But at the same time, whenever you live like that, the minutes matter. I could just tell. I've never seen air up in the air. When George Clooney's character is going through the line, is like, which line to go through based upon the people in that line. Okay, that one's going to be more efficient, so I'm going to go on that security line, and I'll be able to skip these sorts of things. Those moments matter. And so, like, expenses is a nightmare for people who travel. It's gotten easier. Like at Microsoft, we use Concur. That was the mobile app we used for tracking expenses. But even then, that became kind of a hurdle. And the important thing about like what Robert's example was, you start small. So, hey, I'm just going to take a picture of this. I'm going to upload this OneDrive folder, and then it's going to send an email and then put it in the processed folder. And then you can build on it from there. And like, let's say, hey, you don't even want to have to like go manually type in what that expense is or enter in your expense system. You can teach either Power Automate Desktop to do that, or to kind of like go through those mouse clicks, or you can utilize like Azure Vision Learning for pennies on the receipt to go and learn to read those receipts and then enter the details, like the date, the who was there, because you generally have to write who was there on the receipt, right? If you have a business partner or something like that, or you're a customer, the total amounts and those things. We currently use QuickBooks internally, and so we're finding ways that we can automate that receipt process as well. We started basically with just the general inbox, and then again, you build from there. The entire point of automation, Elon Musk, for all of his flaws and whether you like him or don't like him, he has a great saying that says the best process is no process. And it's not saying that processes are important. It's that you should always be looking to streamline your processes, is basically what he says when he said that. So you start with that process. And for automation, I like to start with a whiteboard, whether it's a digital whiteboard or just around a moon, like what do we want to automate and how do we automate that? And you just add those steps. And the beauty is each time you build a process, you can then capture data from that process. And we've discussed that in the other earlier episodes too. So from that perspective, I think we can talk about some industry-specific automation examples. Robert, you just came back from the Energy AI conference. I know you've already mentioned one, but some automation examples from that would be useful for that industry specifically.
Yeah, I think the one thing also we need to mention, the reason why you want to automate things as well is standardization. You know that no matter who's doing it, it's going to be the same. I think that's something that's so overlooked. It's great to have it automated where you don't have to worry about it, but it's even better. And strictly speaking, from a data person, right? Anybody messing with data, standardization is amazing. So that's another benefit and why you should be looking to automate things so that everything's done the same way, regardless of who's doing it, whether somebody leaves or somebody doesn't. So one of the automations I see all the time, and this is, oil and gas specifically, because they take safety very seriously. When there's either somebody getting reprimanded or there's been a safety event or some type of announcement like, hey, here's a new standard operating procedure we have because of this event that has happened. Instead of what they would traditionally do is they would go in and just send out a mass email to, a group or whatever. And in this use case that I was talking to somebody about, and I've implemented, I think everybody has implemented something like this in their organization, but I thought this one was a little interesting. It was a Power App that they implemented, and it knew based off groups, based off of job titles, also based off of managers and who they report to, who to send these SOPs to. And so they would fill out the Power App form, which looked a lot like an email body. And all they have to do is attach the the SOP, and they had an AI LLM, just basic AI integration here that just read what was in the body, and then it would tell it who to send that email to. So although that's their AI is in that whole process of just having to just type in your message, attaching the SOP and knowing who to send it to, I thought that was really interesting. I didn't really take in the function of the LLM piece of it, but that was something that I thought was really good. And you could translate that outside of oil and gas, right? There was another example of an LLM on top of a vision model. So think of like a camera, and you could track who didn't wear their hard hat today. It go in. I know we're getting outside of automation here, but just a lot of great stuff with implementing LLMs inside of your automation to help you extract and do things without you having to be there. So yeah, that was one that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point from the PPE perspective, or personal protection equipment, is utilizing those LLMs and maybe some basic agentic AI to say, okay, it reviewed the footage for that day and saw that Tom wasn't wearing his hard hat for 15 minutes during this specific zone he was in, and he should have been. And instead of like having to run that up to his manager, it just flags that in the system, and then once he hits a threshold, then maybe that runs it up to the manager. But maybe it also sends him an automated email or text message. Hey, we just noticed you weren't wearing your hard hat. Was this correct or not? Because maybe the model was wrong. And so you can actually use their feedback to help train that model to be better in the future. And again, you add another set of eyes to say, okay, was Tom being truthful with that? But there's just a lot of great things you could do. And I think we should use automation and AI kind of in this perspective interchangeably, because at any point during the automation steps, you can inject AI, whether it's vision learning or a large language model or all these other goodies that you can add. And I also want to point out that most people, when they talk about a large language model, are just talking about some kind of use of an existing system, whether it's Meta's Llama 4, which is an open source, or Claude 3.7, or OpenAI's ChatGPT, or Microsoft Copilot. And most organizations aren't building their own LLMs from the ground up. They're training it on their existing LLM on their data. And so just know that you're basically using it kind of as a wrapper. And most SaaS applications you see, like, oh, there's this new SaaS application that'll look at your data and give you a dashboard. They're just using one of these other major models to do that. And there's no reason you can't do that internally in your own organization using those same models. And you're just removing them as the middleman. Maybe they do have some industry specific algorithms or stuff that they've come up with, and that's their secret sauce. But if you're a large organization, you probably have the business knowledge within your organization to build those same tool sets.
Something else I'd like to add about the PPE example. So I think we'd probably agree that even in instances like what y'all talked about, where someone has a clear, infraction, right? They're not wearing their hard hat, or they're not wearing their gloves, or things like that. Even with the obvious issues like that, people probably still aren't 100% monitoring this, nor would most companies deem it a good use of time to have someone review all the footage to catch like obvious issues. So you're certainly not going to have anyone monitoring the footage for almost issues, right? But with automation, you could have the AI or whatever system you're vision learning looking at the footage and also logging the almost issues too, so that again you can set a threshold and say, okay, Bob, it's been 3 times now where you were 2 inches away from getting your foot cut off, or what have you, depending on the scenario, and be able to preventatively assess these issues before there's a major incident that causes someone to be injured, or now your EMR rating's gone up or whatever. You can get ahead of some of these things and also say, okay, is it that our messaging is not clear? Okay, let's look across the organization at which people are having near misses, and what's the theme, and how can we fix that? Do we need to change the environment? Do we need to change the training? Do we need to change the workers, right? But you're not going to have a team of people whose full-time job is to do that. But if you're not having to take the time, all you have is the data and just to assess it and act upon it, well, that's a different ball game entirely.
I think that's a good point. And I kind of gets us into another area, which is manufacturing. So any kind of manufacturing, you have like predictive maintenance. That's another great AI use scenario. And so while you have these vision learning models watching people, you can have them watch machines. And then whenever a machine's getting to the point of breakdown, or you look at the metrics like, okay, this machine who pumps out 10,000 widgets an hour is now only pumping down 8,500 widgets an hour. It's like, why is that happening? Is there a system issue? Is it a hardware issue? So that's another basically use case, is using the same sort of things that you would use to watch people, use it to watch systems and machines during the manufacturing process. And not even that, Robert's used it from an example from the frac sand perspective, but watching the actual product as it's going down the assembly line, and train the models to basically automate some of the tasks that you would normally be having someone watching the conveyor belt and just picking out the bad items. You can use the tools, and they do that now with lasers, and there's some old industry stuff that's been around for 20 or 30 years and pneumatic air pressure to push stuff off, but you can get better and more insights based using those vision models. And as Robert mentioned in our previous episodes, that data is specific to you. Your manufacturing line is specific to you. And so if these companies come to you and say, hey, we can build you this manufacturing AI solution for you off the shelf, that's just hogwash, because your manufacturing line is specific to you and your organization. And so it's going to need to be trained on the data that your organization has, which is your your cameras or sensors or IoT devices you have on that manufacturing line. They can have some basic ideas, but to get it actually trained for you, you're going to have to put in the time and effort to work with them to build that solution.
I think the big thing with that, talking specifically with the software, at this conference that I went to, what I saw, a lot of great software vendors, to be honest. They had a lot of great tools. I saw them, I asked questions and really asked a ton of technical questions, and they're good products. The problem is they're industry agnostic right now, most of them at least. And so they hit every single industry possible. And I understand why, because that makes the most sense. It's the shotgun approach. They're trying to get as much into every industry as they can. But there's just so many niche problems. Brad mentioned the frac sand problem. I think I've mentioned like a shirt going down a conveyor belt before. Just there's things that you're going to want to be able to do, or things that will help your business exponentially, but no, it's not going to be profitable for any software company to build it for you. So either you need to build it internally, or you need to, understand the ROI of, hey, does it make sense to hire a company like us or a SaaS provider or anybody else to do this? Because most of the time, depending on how niche it is, it's only going to be profitable if you build it internally. So that's just something to keep in mind. I don't think a lot of people are thinking about that, because they're thinking it's just going to come in and just figure everything out. Again, we stress this every time. Luckily, at that conference specifically, data was touched on so much, but you have to have data to build these tools. And if you don't have data of frac sand going down a conveyor belt, you can't build anything with that niche, right?
And speaking of niches, we talk about some of the same industries, and we'll do our best to try to keep expanding. But I just want to share that these instances that we're sharing are not always specific to just the industries that we talk about. I mean, take retailing, for instance, right? There's a lot of money that goes into merchandising, and where do we put something, and how do we have people flow through to where they do what? Buy, right? So if you're able to maybe have a vision learning model that's using your internal security cameras to see, are people actually stopping and looking at this incredible merchandising setup that we've done, or did everyone go right in and buy it, and maybe the sales are being driven from your social media ad on the product because they went straight in and they grabbed it right off the shelf and went to the register. I mean, there's just so many different things that you can do. So I just don't want people to feel like it's specific only to the industries that we mentioned. These are just some of the ones that we're more familiar with or have more innate complexity, but it doesn't stop there.
Yeah, that's good to call out. The other good thing to remember, if people are doing this in manufacturing and energy, you can replicate this anywhere, because I would argue those are the most difficult implementations. So to touch on what Carrie said, that's absolutely correct. Never assume when we're talking industries here, right? Most of the stuff you can replicate. It's just a little different per industry.
At the end of the day, we're talking about business processes, and a business process is a business process. It has a start and it has an end, and there's however many steps there are and branches in between is kind of up to that process and up to your company. And if you don't have your processes documented, that's where you start. That's literally where you start. Well, you document those processes, then you start looking at it and dissecting with your team. Okay, what's our biggest headache? Would be the biggest lift to, what would be the biggest lift to automate? What would be the easiest, lowest hanging fruit to automate? You need to have those conversations. Accounts payable is something that's across all industries. We brought it up before, but that's something that's very easy to automate. The models are trained really, really well. You don't need to go train a model to read how to invoices. All the big model providers have already trained their models to do that at a large scale. There's no reason for you to do that. You can scan invoices for fractions of a penny per invoice. And like we're talking, if you have a company that processes 80 to 100 invoices a month, you're looking at 40 or 50 bucks at most to process those invoices automatically with vision learning. Obviously, you still need to have human in the chain somewhere to verify those invoices and the data that those are doing, but you can add those really, really quickly. So the same thing from a legal perspective, legal documentation. I'll be quite honest with you. We have lawyers that are on retainer for $650 an hour. Our legal bills have plummeted because now we know how to write contracts. We say, this is how we write a primary service agreement or a master service agreement for our clients. Now we know how to do that. We just talk to the models that we use to do that going forward. The same thing for our SOWs. Like we have an SOW for a merger and acquisition. We're going through a split. This is how we did it previously. Here, we need one for this client, and here's all the variables for that client. You can do this across every industry. If you have something that needs to be repeated and is repeatable, and you want to make sure that accuracy and consistency, Robert brought this up earlier, but consistency is important, then AI is the key of that. One thing about AI, it is consistent. It gives you a consistent output as long as you train those models.
So Brad, you mentioned documenting processes, and that's somewhere to start. Y'all are going to hear us say that a lot because it's foundational. It's not a step that can be skipped, and it gets you further along the path to some of the other things. So I really want to tie into how automation, but also the starting point, which is having your business processes documented and then optimized with AI and automation and things in mind, their role of automation and process in data quality and the journey to AI. So as you've heard us mention, consistency, accuracy, and reliability are all the big wins that come from doing some of those activities. So Brad or Robert, if you want to jump in with what strikes you the most about those three pillars of automation and data quality.
Where I was going to go with it, and I'll let Brad touch on that because I think he's probably got a better answer than I will. This is the flow that goes through my head. You document whatever process, you automate wherever you can in that process. And the reason why you document it is so that it's really easy to see and understand. Most of the time it's in your head, and then there's just small little things you forget about until you get it on paper or get it in front of other people on your team. So once you have that fully documented, automate what you can. And then after you're there, that's kind of the baseline. Okay. Everybody should be doing that today, in my opinion. And now with AI, you can strategically place it in certain spots in that process. And that's where the agents come in, because you'll have agents doing maybe one aspect of this process. And then you have automation doing step 3 or 4, right? So that's how I think about it. I think, Carrie, you're kind of bringing it all together, which I think is really good because we talk about this all the time. So I just wanted to call that out. That's kind of just how I think about this stuff. So Brad, I'll let you take it over from here.
No, I think you covered it really well. I think that's the roadmap for success. Documentation is the number one thing you can do. And Robert, you and I were talking as you were leaving the conference yesterday, and I think this is a really important thing for us to bring up. But basically, the amount of information we're going to lose over the next decade or two from retiring people within the workforce that isn't documented right now. And especially in the oil and gas and or petroleum industry, as we call it down here in Texas, they're going to be feeling the biggest crunch of that. Robert, can you touch base on that?
Yeah, honestly, something I haven't even considered. Everybody knows the job market is really funky right now, especially with blue collar work where, traditionally, especially people in my generation, a millennial generation, aren't doing blue collar jobs, plumbing, electrical, welding, oil and gas, like specifically boots on the ground, out in the field type of roles, right? Petroleum engineers. There was a study that one of the speakers brought up. It was back in 2022 from Texas Tech University that there's been an 83% drop in petroleum engineering graduates. And I believe it was from like 2017 till 2020 or 2021. We'll put that in the show notes just so you can look at it. But I thought that was so fascinating. You definitely hear about it, but I've never really considered the documentation aspect because everybody knows somebody that's been inside of a company and they know everything. I could name at least 3 or 4 guys that I've worked with in the past where they just had this knowledge that it's almost like you can't teach it, right? It's just, you learn it and you live it and you have it. And it's not documented anywhere. It's just right here. And so that was a big problem they brought up. That's, we're going to think about internally too for product development, but also I think every industry, especially if you're boots on the ground or in an industry that's tough to find new employees, you need to be thinking about that because I never even considered that or how big of a problem that is.
Hearing you say that, it's making me think of almost a modern day, like burning of the Library of Alexandria, right? Like there's just so much that's going to be gone into the ether. It's kind of scary. Thank you for calling that out. It's important.
here's the crazy thing. It's not just it's not just an application problem. Like the people have to want to give you that information. So there's this whole people side of it that you also have to solve. Like, hey, why do I care if I document this for this company that I'm not going to be working for anymore in 3 or 4 years? You know what I mean? Like that's a reality. So like, how do you tackle that? That's a whole other problem. So it's good. It's good it's getting brought up. There's definitely solutions out there. I think there was one company at this conference that, and I don't remember the exact premise, but it was basically like you could sell your knowledge. So you would chat with an LLM bot, and if the answer that somebody found was the one they used, you would actually get paid for your answer. So I think the knowledge that you have and the knowledge transfer between organizations, because that was the idea. Every organization has the data for whatever their documentation or whatever, and you would search for it and you would get paid, or you're getting paid if somebody's using it essentially. And so that's an interesting concept. Again, we'll adapt, we'll figure it out. I don't think it's doom or gloom. I just think it is so interesting because we're just going to lose a lot. I think they said in 5 or 6 years, the last of the baby boomers are retiring. And so that there's just going to be a huge shift, I think, from that moment forward.
It is scary because, like Carrie was saying, the Library of Alexandria, like it is that level of like knowledge loss. And I think if you're a business leader right now and you have a larger organization, you can even have a smaller organization where someone's been with you for 30 or 40 years and they're 10% of the company. And once they leave, you lose all of that knowledge. There are tools now to help you extract that knowledge. Let's connect some automation and LLMs into their inbox and just glean all the information you can from their inbox and all their industry knowledge that they have from their inbox. There are tools that are hopefully going to help come with that, but you should be thinking about that now. And the only way to really start that is to document your processes. Again, I spent about a year at Chevron very early on in my career, and it's the best thing that could ever happen to me because Chevron is one of those companies that did document everything. I remember when I was building servers, there were virtual machines, and like every time I built a virtual machine, I had to print out the actual document on how to do it. And then I had to sign at the end, and I hit the check boxes and I had to sign it in because, again, they wanted that consistency. They want to know it's a major organization, global organization. They want to know all of our servers were built exactly the same using the exact same script. And you should want your organization to get to that level of detail. Obviously, with smaller businesses, that's really hard because you're juggling so many things. But the ROI is there. It's proven. If you can document these things, get them to a place where you can automate some of these really mundane tasks and free up that extra time, it is so worth it. So thanks for bringing that up, Robert. I think that's something that we will probably need to keep bringing up is like institutional knowledge is so important. We kind of do, right? We say that like you need to be a business analyst rather than a technologist. You need to understand the business and just understand the technology and bring those things together. I think we can give a couple more quick examples. I don't have to dive too deep as we have on the other things, but healthcare is another big thing here in Houston. We have Texas Medical Center, which is massive. Healthcare is also something that affects pretty much everybody. I just recently had surgery, and it's something that all of us are going to come across in our life. And we've all had our times where automation and AI, auto responses from our insurance companies and stuff has been a giant headache. So hopefully they can utilize AI to increase the efficiency on their end, which would allow them to spend more money on customer care. We'll see if that actually happens. But as an example of some things from a healthcare perspective is patient scheduling and system automation for appointments. And this is basically any kind of CRM, right? So Carrie lives in the CRM world as our head of growth. And Carrie, do you just want to touch on how you see automation helping from the scheduling perspective?
Absolutely. I mean, being able to understand what the what the type of meeting is, what the typical length of that type of meeting is, having your calendar automatically allot for do you have to travel? It can build in padding for getting back to your desk after a meeting, or allowing for a little cushion to log your notes or whatever needs to be done there. But it's also just the amount of time that is wasted on going back and forth with scheduling. I think we could all agree that none of us would miss that activity if it could just be accurately and efficiently done. I think that there's no industry that wouldn't benefit from that. But definitely, you mentioned healthcare. I mean, there's not a single person that hasn't ever waited or doesn't typically always wait at the doctor's office, right? Which makes it impossible. Speaking of scheduling, it's like, okay, my appointment's at 9. I get there at 8:45. It's 11:15. I still haven't even seen the doctor. So now the whole rest of my calendar is ruined because they told me 1 hour. So technically I should have been back in my office an hour and a half ago. It spirals out of control. So the exponential effect of tightening up scheduling is huge.
On the scheduling, I could think of a few. Everybody's gotten work done at a home or a business with contractors, and there's some you'll work with where it automatically sends you a text when they leave to come to your house. I love that because it goes to show how they're running their businesses. I mean, at least for me personally, because that's just how I think. Like, I would want to implement something like that. Text you when they leave. When they get there, it texts you. When they leave the location, it automatically texts you a receipt, an invoice. And again, this isn't stuff you don't necessarily have to build. There's tons of products out there that do this, and they're very cost effective. And I think a lot of businesses that I see don't utilize these tools for whatever reason. They're running a lot of business, especially in the service industry, running their business out of their phone, out of their notebook, and that's great. Maybe that's all you want, but I think if you want to take it to the next step, that's I love when people do that. It's just ease of access, ease of use. But like Carrie said, the scheduling aspect of this just so much better for the customer, for me.
And the service industry is really important one because Carrie's mentioned it before that AI and automation helps the smaller businesses probably at a better scale than it does the larger scale businesses because you're limited by your staff, right? You're limited by the number of people you have. Maybe you're a solopreneur and you're the only person doing the work. So whatever time you can free up for yourself is going to be exponentially better. As Robert said, with the skilled services industry is what I like to call it. Plumbing, electricians, HVAC. I have a nephew who just started a window cleaning business and he's utilizing Stripe and these other tools to do his automated bookings. Well, these legacies, older folks who have been doing it for 20 or 30 years, they're doing all of this by like literally still writing hand ticket invoices. And most of the people running these businesses now are in probably their early 30s, early 40s. And they come from a world where, hey, I've just been able to tap my card all these years. I don't want to have to worry about the invoice. I just want to sign up and pay for it on a regular basis. So you can automate all those kinds of things at a service industry level too, to make your life so much easier. And like my nephew, he just started his business a couple months ago and he's won 3 or 4 huge contracts within the last week, including like a Tesla dealership, because I think a lot of it has to do obviously with the quality of work that they're offering and being eager and going out and they're selling and just putting in the grind. But having those tools, like Robert said, I had my HVAC system replaced in my place. And it was like $8,000. It was the middle of June. It was miserable here in Houston, but the experience was so easy because I reached out to him on Yelp. He sent me a text message, automated text message from Yelp. And then we basically, everything happened via our phones. And it was, I just got like a scheduled reminder that, hey, it's time for a checkup yesterday from him. So that's fresh on the mind. The fact that people are using automation at these skilled labor positions, I think is going to be really, really important for that. I can't even imagine trying to juggle as an HVAC person in Houston in July, where it's 95 degrees and 95% humidity. I can't imagine like trying to, juggle that manually, those scheduling things manually. So hopefully those smaller businesses are utilizing these automated tools too.
Yeah, and then it's positive for the client experience too. Let's take someone who does lawn maintenance on a large scale, right? Quick, hey, jobs don't always take the exact same amount of time. Hey, I'm leaving my previous client and heading your way. Friendly reminder to make sure the dog's inside and your car's moved if you don't want grass on it. Little things like that. There's no shortage to the creativity that can be implemented on top of these same tools that both makes your life easier as the service provider, but it's also that added little white glove touch that would easily differentiate you in a market.
And the good thing is the market has kind of figured this out too, which means there's a plethora of options you can choose from. You could develop it internally, or you can go find some SaaS product out there that's probably doing it for you. So the other one I was thinking of too, when you go to a restaurant and they ask for your phone number, I mean, to me, I love that because I don't have to sit there and go bug the people at the stand to ask like, hey, how much longer do I have? It's all right in my phone. I can see who's on the wait list. I think Open Table does that. I love that. I wish every sit down restaurant would do something like that because it just takes all the guessing out of it. You don't have to bother people.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the kiosks. I think Chili's has them and others where literally you can just pay your tab. You don't have to wait for the tab. Obviously, in a nicer restaurant, that's not something you want to do. And kiosk is actually a great business model because they get so much instant feedback on how their service was because people are more attuned to filling out a survey if it's digital, right? We're so used to tapping on our phones all the time. And I think we've kind of covered the plethora of businesses today. So now we can how can people get started? So Carrie, do you want to kick us off on just like the basics of process automation and what we recommend from that perspective?
I mean, I think first, just to kind of wrap up, what we were just talking about, the trick is to pick a tool that fits the size of your organization and also your use case, right? So there's no point in swinging a sledgehammer at a thumbtack, but also, as they say, you don't want to show up to a gunfight with a knife, right? You need to have the right tool for the job. So I think a holistic assessment, understanding what's available and what is the right lift for what you're looking to accomplish, both in the immediate stage, but also something that can grow and scale with you. So that's really our approach as well. We always look at it from a strategic lens and understand not only, where are you today, where are you looking to go, and putting as much of that contextual information as makes sense in there so that we can have a mutual success plan and not go crash, bang, boom to the finish line, as I like to say. So looking at that, and then like Brad said, your processes, do you even have them documented? Where do they live? Are they in a shareable location? Or are they in somebody's notebook, like locked in their desk, right? That's not going to be helpful. Then is the process optimized in general for your business? Then is it optimized to take into account technology inputs and to be able to build automation, right? Because each of those triggers along a process is a data capture point, which we're going to keep talking about these things, folks, but it's very foundational. And then from there, you're able to add some small automations. And we like to really say, let's pick the place that you're going to get either the most immediate benefit from, or that it's a small impact to one individual, but 57% of your organization is doing that activity every day. Therefore, the collective impact is more immediate and tangible, right? And use that extra bit of resources, time, energy, money, whatever it may be, after the first use case to roll it in and get that snowball effect going. Obviously, there are instances where there's an immediate burning fire that needs addressing, right? And that takes a little bit different approach. But from a general standpoint, really just getting those quick wins and leveraging that into further use cases. It's amazing once your team has a little bit more time back, what they can really do strategically.
What I tell people, identify repetitive tasks, and specifically ones you don't like, which I think most repetitive tasks people do are things they probably don't enjoy doing, but pick three to five of those and try to automate it and figure out how you can do that. And look, maybe some of them it's not possible. You can't do the most difficult task, right? As well, you got to do something somewhat simple. So because that'll help you define what tools you can use, whether it's internally with Microsoft 365 or G Suite, whichever version you're using. That's what I typically start with. So think about it that way.
One other thing I'd like to call out, and I don't think I've ever explicitly stated this, at least not on this podcast yet, but when you're brainstorming around these things, that's the time to take the rose-colored glasses off in the initial stages, right? Once we do some of the documentation and the discovery, then we can put those rose-colored glasses back on to be forward-looking. But when we're talking about what's the current state of things, that's when we need to be 100% honest, get comfortable with one another. That's not the time to try to impress your boss by saying, oh no, that works great, we're fine, because you don't want to get in trouble, or you don't want your coworkers to get in trouble. Put all that out the window and just objectively look at it, because if not, you're not going to get what you need out of it. No matter what, everything can be improved upon. And if the honest truth is that something, a use case, a process is currently a dumpster fire, let's just acknowledge that and let's fix it and let's move on. But trying, for whatever variety of reason there might be, to kind of glaze over, sugarcoat that, is going to bite you big time down the road. So let's put the honest glasses on in the initial stages, and then we can throw the rose-colored, glasses on and the disco ball and all that good stuff when we get a little bit further down the road.
Just a little example of something very simple that I used to do, that I was like, hey, I just need to sit down for 20-30 minutes and figure out how to automate this every week. And I was IT manager. We would get these reports. People would go and click on the reports every Monday. They'd have to go log in to their web portal. We were using Power BI, so they had to go get their bookmark and log in every day. And I sat down and I noticed the user was doing this because I was on site at the time. And I said, hey, why don't I just send you the report in a PDF at this time every day on Monday? And they were like, yeah, that would be awesome. They wouldn't have to spend any time logging into the portal or remembering where this bookmark is, because they may not even look at it every week. They may only look at it every other week, or every 3 or 4 weeks. So something as simple as sending them an email PDF of a report that they can click on and get an instant link and access to, they loved it. Again, it doesn't have to be this huge thing.
And I would say that don't let excuses and or roadblocks within your organization stop you from automating your tasks. We've all worked at larger organizations and been in those places that have analysis paralysis, or the IT team is the biggest hurdle to get over because of security or compliance or any of those sort of things that myself and Robert have actually given as ourselves in our past lives. You should be able to at least be able to automate some things within your life and or to your personal business processes to automate and make your life easier. And again, don't worry so much about the tool. Just start building. Just shut up and build is what, I like to say. Just start figuring out a way to do it. Some really low barrier of entries is IFTTT, or if this, then that. And then Power Automate, Zapier, Make.com, Monday.com. Those are all no code, low code, very easy. If you know how to use Microsoft Visio or drag things around on a PowerPoint slide, you can figure out how to do those things. Then you can dive deeper into, as you're working with your teams to build things out for your whole business, then you're looking at like Azure Logic Apps, Dynamics 365 Business Process Flows, N8N, HubSpot Workflows, Zoho Flow, depending on what CRM you may be utilizing within your organization, or ERP, you can utilize their built-in workflows as well. Just don't let the excuses pile up. If I'm a king of procrastination, so I understand that. Just don't let that get in the way. You'll be thankful once you start doing this, and you'll start snowballing. And that didn't take as long as I thought it was going to be, and you'll get better with these tools. And what tool you used to build your automation last week may change next week, because it's all about the problem you're trying to solve. Like, there are some things I would still use IFTTT for today that are very basic, but most of what I do right now is a Power Automate. But from a business perspective, we're looking at the Azure Logic Apps, N8N type stuff, the heavier lifts. But we leave that on the table whenever we're giving options to our customers. We like that Goldilocks, so like hot, medium, cold kind of thing, and work our way from there. So just don't let people get in your way, and just do the best you can with the guardrails put in front around you, and just continue to make that iterative progress every day.
To that effect, I just want to echo what Brad's saying. There's so much that you can do without needing anyone else's input or approval or access to a system. But I'm sure there are some of you that are thinking, oh, I have this great use case, but I would have to get approval from IT to even do XYZ or see this part of the system. There are some use cases where maybe it's a little bit trickier. However, what there is zero barrier to is saying, do we have a process? If not, I can be the one to document it. And I can also be the one to document what automation would look like, and maybe like a rough bracket of like, here's how much time each of these steps is taking me, because the person that you're showing this to, your boss or whomever, they may not realize that it's taking you that long, or because you've already done the groundwork. Well, now they're more willing to have the conversation because it's moved from conceptual. A phrase I love to use is taking potential energy and turning it into kinetic energy, and something as simple as just diagramming it, even if you're not able to actually automate it yet, which in many cases you are able to. But I know there's some people out there saying, well, this case in specific, but there's nothing stopping you from doing those things and putting it in front of the people who can help you. And now you're that much further along.
This is why I'll continue to echo that these small organizations have such an advantage, because they don't have to deal with all that. There was a whole section at this conference about standards with how they're doing their data and how they're doing their security. And yes, standards are extremely important, but the reality is small businesses don't have time to implement those detailed standards. And so you're not having to deal with all of that. Again, you have a huge advantage from the larger companies out there, because you don't have all the hoops to jump through.
Just having those stakeholder meetings could take multiple regions, multiple locations, multiple time zones to get all the people on the phone. And it could take 2 or 3 weeks because people's calendars are booked up or someone's out. But if you're a small business, 10 or 15 people, the stakeholder can call in lunch one day and get around a whiteboard and knock it out. And so you have the chance to be more nimble. The Davids can tackle the Goliaths, and technology is a great equalizer. We say it all the time. Carrie, we just iterate one more time on why there's not really time to wait on this to get started?
Boy, where do I start on that one? I could give you a plethora of reasons. It's just not optional anymore. If you take the human aspect, your teams are fried from doing a bunch of manual grunt work. Thinking about AI is useless if your data and your processes are garbage. There's no point. So this journey that we're talking about, that's great if you start marching down the path. But if you leave all the things that you need back at home, when you get to the finish line, you're going to have to go back around and start again. Right. But it's, It's not about tech for tech's sake. It's about modernization, the ability to stay competitive, the ability to attract and retain great talent. There's just so many reasons, honestly. It's for me, growing up in a family of small business owners, while we need larger and enterprise size organizations too, like I just don't want to see the day when so many great, wonderful businesses that people have put their blood, sweat, and tears into go under because they didn't start marching down this inevitable path and they pulled the ostrich head in the sand move. And that's not the American dream, folks, right? We want you to thrive. We want you to be have business continuity and be able to live long and prosper for yourself and for your future generations of your family and also of your employees. So don't be stubborn and obstinate like we all can, because the world is moving in this direction whether you like it or not. So do you want to be on the upside, or do you want to be just playing the shoulda, woulda, coulda game? Nobody likes that.
I think that segues perfectly into our topic for next week, which basically AI and automation aren't just IT's problems to solve. So there's going to be a lot of challenges to our everyday business listeners and everyday business users with next week's episode, where, again, hopefully we can also convince folks within these larger organizations as well that they need to enable their users to succeed and to do these things. Because, again, the IT teams and the technology teams, they don't know the business and they don't know the secret sauce. So they need to work together to make these sort of things happen. And so next week, that's going to be our episode. AI and automation aren't just IT's problem to solve. So with that said, we hope you tune in. Until next week, bye.
Thanks.
We want to hear about your AI and automation journey, and we'd love for you to get involved with Start Small, Think Big. If you'd like to participate or offer feedback, please reach out to us anytime via email at contact@digitalmeld.io or use the contact form on our website, digitalmeld.io/contact. Also, please help spread the word by liking, subscribing, and sharing our podcasts on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks.